Hey friends, it is currently snowing outside, which means we got some work to do. Let me show you why. This is a brand new Argus Trail fat bike made by Mongoose, and this thing is really awesome. But because it's snowing, we gotta get this thing built really quick. If the snow keeps up, the trails around here are gonna be primo in just a couple days. Now, because it's cold and snowy, we're actually gonna be doing this build in the house today, much to the chagrin of my wife. But this bike is actually for her, and we've got about an hour before she comes home from work. Should give us plenty of time to get her a great surprise when she walks in the door.
Now, ordering a bike from Mongoose is super easy. In fact, you can do it straight from Amazon. We'll put some links in the description box below for this specific bike. Most people can put this together using this video as a guide in less than an hour. In fact, you're really only going to need a couple of small, simple tools that you probably already have. Now, as I mentioned, today's build is focusing on the Argus Trail, but check out our channel if you'd like to see other builds for these Mongoose fat tire bikes. There she is, all out of the box. You can see it's packaged really nice. Now again, this may feel a little intimidating, but believe it or not, this bike is almost completely put together. So let's go ahead and get it all fully unwrapped so we can see what our next steps will be. Look at this thing. I love that army green with that Mongoose logo on there. This thing is a really good looking bike. Now, what I am gonna do for now is leave the coverings on the bars. That's just gonna help with a little protection in case those bars slide around. I'm also gonna keep this foam padding on the bottom of our fork. What we do need to do is get our seat post in. So I'm gonna wrap this and get it installed. I really love the detail that Mongoose has put into these graphics. Look how the green matches the bike frame. That's really cool.
Okay, so as you can see, we've got the Argus Trail up in a bike stand. Now, a bike stand is not necessary. It just really helps us with the process, allows us to get to different areas of the bike without it tipping over or falling if it's on the ground. And one of the first things I do with a new bike up in the stand is I get the seat nice and level with the frame. Out of the box, it has this kind of downward slope. So all we need to do is come underneath the seat rails here. You're gonna find two little bolts, loosen those up, and then we're gonna gently adjust this thing until it's nice and parallel with this upper part of the frame.
To loosen those bolts, we'll need a size 5 or a 5mm Allen key or a hexagonal key here. This is also a perfect time to slide the seat back and forth depending on your adjustability and where you like to be in relationship to your handlebars. Everything feels and looks good. Remember to tighten these bolts back down. Okay, now that the bike is off the floor, we can go ahead and unwrap the rest of our handlebar protection as well as the lower fork foam padding.
Okay, it's time to get these handlebars in the straight position. Now, you don't need to be perfect at this point. We just want to get it nice and aligned with our eyes. I like to use this little Mongoose emblem that's straight on the front. So what we're going to do is there's two bolts that are right around the top of the fork up here where the handlebar stem is. We're going to use a 3mm Allen key. And basically, we're just going to loosen these two bolts up. You don't have to loosen them a lot. Just a couple of turns should do it. And once that's nice and loose, we can actually hold this downward part center, and then we're going to slide this with our hand all the way around front until it's nice and aligned with our emblem.
Now, don't forget down here to make sure your brake caliper is on the right-hand side of the fork. In case you forget, there's actually a little sticker that's right here on the back of the fork that lets you know to put that in the rear. Once everything looks pretty good, we'll go ahead and tighten these bolts back down. You don't have to do this too tight. Again, remember, we're going to be checking this for perfect alignment once we get the wheel on. Now, using that same 3mm Allen key, we're gonna go ahead and loosen up all of these bolts that are right here on the front of this clamp. And we're gonna take this whole thing off so we can get the bars up and into place. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do is take our handlebars and we're gonna be putting them up into place and obviously putting that clamp back on around the bars. Now here's where some preference comes into play. You can adjust these bars basically like this based off of your preference. Now most people are gonna ride with those shifters kind of upright, straight out of the factory. It gives what's called the rise of the bars. enough lift to kind of bring it up and make it comfortable, but some people like this adjusted back just a little bit. So again, figure out what your specific riding preference is, and we'll go ahead and put that clamp back in.
Now, a couple quick tips when you're doing this. Go in an X pattern when you're tightening, and that way things will lock in evenly as you're moving that bolt into place. Also, before you fully rotate and really clamp it on there, make sure this is a little bit loose so you can adjust it and really get it nice and perfectly aligned with that front emblem. That way everything's nice and lined up.
Okay, so we have our bars at our preferred riser angle, but as you can see, these brake levers are a little bit too high. We really like ours angled about like this. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna loosen up both our brake levers as well as our shifters. Now the shifters are gonna be a 3mm, while the bolt for the brake levers is gonna be under here, that's a 5mm. We'll loosen those up and then we'll pivot these slightly down. Again, adjust these to your comfort based off of how you want your wrist angled when it's up in this position. Once you've found your proper angle, come over here to the right-hand side and do the same thing with this brake lever and this shifter. Don't forget to tighten down your bolts when you're done. Now at this point, you can use these little cable management clips to clip things into place and get things nice and organized so that you don't have a rat's nest up here. Okay, it's time to mount the front wheel. So what we're gonna need in this little box that you will find obviously buried in that bigger box is your skewer. This is a quick release skewer. We're gonna use this to mount the front tire through this little axle that's here and onto the front fork. We are gonna need to pull off these covers. Now to get this other cover piece on the other side off, it's a little tricky. I like to use my skewer. Basically just make sure these springs are over here by the quick release. We'll take off that little nut on the end. And then I'm just gonna come through the side with our rotor here, and we're gonna just push the skewer straight through and pop off this side just like that. Okay, so here is how this wheel is going to mount on our front fork here. Basically, again, make sure your brake caliper is on the right-hand side over here, and then make sure your brake rotor is also on that same side. And we're gonna lift this guy up into place, putting that rotor right into that brake pad slot that's right there in that caliper. Now the other thing we're gonna need is our skewer. Make sure the quick release is on the right-hand side and that nut is on the other side. You're gonna have one spring on either side of that axle. And then over here, we'll just put the spring into place like that, and then screw the nut just gently into place. I will need to hold the quick release with my other hand. Now don't screw this down all the way. You want to leave a nice gap so the fork slots in there easily. Now I'm going to slide this up into place, but again, if this doesn't lock perfectly, feel free to turn the bike upside down on the seat and the handlebars and drop it in from the top. That way gravity pulls it down exactly where it needs to be and you can tighten things up. Again, this is basically how it looks though. You just pull this up, make sure that rotor slides in between the brake pads, make sure the fork goes around those two little points on the skewer. Go ahead and tighten down on the nut on the left-hand side. When everything's in place, you can basically just use this little quick release, put it in upward position, and that should keep things nice and in place. We are so close to being done. Go ahead and grab those pedals now and let's stick them on. Now we're gonna work on the left pedal first. Thankfully, these are really nicely labeled. You can see that has an L sticker. You can also find the labeling on the little end over here. You can see there's an L. And what we're gonna do is you're just gonna come up here to the bike frame, find that corresponding crank arm, and we're gonna go ahead and thread these into place. Now, one of the other nice things about the stickers is it shows you which way to turn to tighten. So in this specific instance, I am actually going counterclockwise to tighten. It's actually reversed on the opposite side. So again, take note of the direction you need to turn. Now, once this gets too tight for your fingers, you can actually use a pedal wrench. This is a 15 mil, and so if you have just a regular 15 mil wrench, it should work just fine. Make sure you get this nice and snug. You may need to push down on the pedal in the opposite direction. Once you have that in there, we'll go ahead and do the same thing on the reverse side. Oh boy, friends, down off the bike stand. I'm getting super excited to give this thing a rip, but there are a couple of quick things we need to do just to make sure everything's aligned and in place. First, looks like the seat needs to be adjusted just a touch. The other thing I like doing is coming over the front bars, and now we can really dial in our alignment with that front tire. As you can potentially see on camera, this is angled just a touch to the right. So again, I'll loosen these bolts that are over here and make sure that really is centered perfectly with our tire. We then want to take some time and check all of our bolts. On our rear derailleur, on our brakes here, basically just go through with your wrenches, make sure everything's nice and tight and locked down. Give everything a look over. You really don't want anything failing on you out in the trail. So one of the things that I discovered on my final check was that the chain is actually off of the small ring. So to fix that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna push the bottom of the derailleur here. It's gonna give me a lot of slack on the chain, and then I'll just wrap that around that little guy. There we go, all ready to rock. Give your brakes a squeeze, make sure there's some nice good contact and that you're not getting slippage to where you're not grabbing anything. These feel pretty dang good. And then lastly, let's check our tire air pressure. These came inflated, and we typically use the Schrader valve down here. Get your bike pump out, and we'll run roughly 10 to 12 PSI here in Colorado. If there's a lot of snow, I've heard people run these as low as 8 PSI. Again, check for your preference. And there she is, my friends, all ready for her maiden voyage. Man, this is such a good looking bike. I really am impressed. I would consider this a budget bike that is gonna be really good for folks wanting to get into the fat tire scene. It really does have all of the basics that you're gonna need to enjoy yourself out on the trail. Now up front, you can see we have micro shift shifters. Again, there's 2 of them because this is a 2x8 drivetrain that we'll take a peek at here in a sec. Now these are unlabeled mechanical disc brakes, meaning they do use a cable to clamp down on that rotor for braking. Now this is an entry-level braking system, but honestly I've used these on other fat tire bikes and they work pretty good. Now these big tires down here are off-brand Chinese tires, and they measure 26 by 4.0, that's in inches. Now that's a great thick tire that's gonna be plenty for most trails out there. Now, if these components are something you'd really like upgraded, check out the Argus Sport and Comp models. They've got Tektro hydraulic brakes, as well as a 1x10 drivetrain using Shimano components. All right, looking at our cranks and front derailleur, you can see it's a micro shift. And that, again, is 2x up front, going all the way over here. And we've got 8 different gears in the back on our cassette, as well as this micro shift derailleur. Now, no clutch or anything down here, but again, if you're looking for those upgrades, you can find them on the Argus Sport or Argus Comp.
All right, there you go, friends. That came together pretty easy, pretty quick. I hope these steps have helped you, and we got this finished in time to surprise my wife. Now stay tuned, because we're actually going to be taking this out on the trail with my wife. I'll be riding the Argus Sport, she'll have the trail. We'll kind of compare the two and then be able to give our full review. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again on the next one.